Well, first of all, I mean, is everybody here aware of what WASPI is, or does anybody need explained a wee bit? Right, okay, there's a couple of folk. Well, basically what happened is that pensionable age was different for men and women, and women were going to retire at 60. Now, what happened in 1995 was legislation was passed that said that they were going to equalise the age at which men and women retired, but that would come in over a 15-year timetable. Now, what they got really wrong, and consecutive governments, so this is both Labour and Conservative governments, is they never notified a single woman about these changes whatsoever. The only evidence that I was able to find of it ever being in the public domain was a couple of pages at the back of the Financial Times and stuff, and a couple of wee adverts here and there, but there was never any formal communication by the government to women to let them know that this change was happening. So fast forward then to 2011, and what the coalition did was they said, see that 15-year timetable, we're going to take the last stages of that, and instead of allowing that to come through, 6 or 7 years, they says we're just going to cram it all right into 1.5 years. So what you were finding was that women were expecting to retire at 60, but they were getting letters saying, oh no, you're not retiring until you're 66. So they've been planning their entire lives going, I'm retiring then, but then at the last moment the goalposts have been moved. Now they didn't start writing out to people, the government, didn't formally start writing to people until I believe the first letter was sent out in 2007. So that was about 14 years after these changes had first been introduced. So what we've been campaigning on is saying, look, we support the idea that men and women should retire at the same age, but it's a case of how do you get to that stage? Because there was the Turner Commission, they were commissioned to look into changes to pensionable age, and they said that if you want to change anything to do with the pension age or the age of retirement, you have to allow for at least 15 years for that change to happen. So they're trying to put in 30 years worth of changes into 2 years. So what we've been fighting with the government about is saying, look, scrap that timetable altogether. You need to go for a stretched approach into how you can phase in this men and women retiring at equal age. Because apart from anything else, the women that are affected in particular are born in the 1950s, and they're the very generation that have had to fight inequality throughout their entire lives, whether that be in work or whether that be in their personal life. So to then throw this extra thing in at the last hurdle, to me, is just absolutely scandalous. So you've got women who are losing out maybe 40 grand easy on their pension. Folk have been having to sell their homes and things. It's been really grim, especially because I've been vocal about it. I've had a lot of folk from all through the UK getting in touch with us, and it is looking pretty depressing. So what we did, the government, gave the usual answer of saying, no, it costs too much, we can't afford it, we need to tighten our belts. And they said that to put in these transitional arrangements would take, £30 billion, they said. So we thought, that's rubbish. If I had the wee bells, they'd have been rattling in the chamber. But we didn't have any evidence. So what the SNP group did, myself and Ian Blackford, we're the two that work in pensions for the SNP down in London. And what we did was we got the party to agree to fund an independent report. So there was this guy, Howard Reid, from Landman Economics, and he produced a report that said if you were to go back to the original timetable, which means that it would slow down and allow a lot of breathing space for women affected, it would cost £8 billion spread across 5 years. So this £30 billion is just an absolute nonsense. And even that £8 billion, I appreciate that's a lot of money, but our report also highlighted the fact that by the government's own figures, the National Insurance Fund is going to be sitting at a surplus of £30 billion at the end of this financial year. So the idea that we can't afford to put in £8 billion to give women pensions across 5 years, when in 1 year the surplus is £30 billion, is just utter nonsense. So that's what we've been pushing and arguing for. I know Teresa's got a copy of it because I handed her one. I don't know if she's read it, mind you, but myself and Ian are still pressing away on that one, and I think that's again why this election is really important, because we have to have folk back down there that are going to continue that fight, because for us this election is just a total inconvenience. I mean, I'm sure we'll touch on it later on, but this election is nothing more than a cynical political move by Theresa May that actually looks as though it's starting to go a wee bit wrong. But for the rest of us, we get elected thinking, right, we've got 5 years to really batter into these things, and then 2 years into it, it's election time again. So I'm really keen to get back to all the work that I was doing to continue to push it, and WASPI is one of the main ones for that. So I hope that explained it. They started sending out a couple from 2007, but this is what I mean, this is how the entire issue is an absolute riot, because we did freedom of information requests to the Department of Work and Pensions to say how many letters did you send out, and it came back, I think it was something like 240,000 were sent out between 2007 and 2010, I believe, but it's they're roughly that. And also these letters went to the wrong address. They went to old addresses. Some of them mysteriously weren't delivered. And it's strange because, I had women coming to me and saying, I've never been written to about this. And the government would maintain, no, all women affected were written to. And what was really telling about it was, it's funny how the government sends that letter to the wrong address, but manages to send letters chasing up for money, chasing up for tax, all the rest of it. All of these letters managed to make it to the right house. So the whole thing just reeks from start to finish, and it's been scandalous that they've been allowed to, tread on the way that they have been. Well, what we're saying is, see the 1995 timetable that was spread out, it said these changes would take 15 odd years before they can kick in. We're wanting to go back to that original timetable. Now, it's not perfect, this plan. Basically, the logic that me and Ian had was, because this is a time-sensitive issue, because that's why the Tories are just continuing to talk it out, because they're hoping that it will just sort itself out and disappear, which eventually it will do. So we realised we've got a really short space of time here to try and get something through. Let's try and put forward something that can actually get support from most people in the House. Even Tories should be able to support this, because it's fully costed, it's a reasonable approach. It's not saying just give everybody their pensions early or bring the retirement age back down. It's not suggesting anything like that, because we knew we'd never get support for anything like this. So what we're saying is going back to the original timetable, which means that the rise from 65 to 66 for everybody would be pushed into the next Parliament. So for the next 5 years that wouldn't be happening. And then I can't remember off the top of my head exactly where the sort of different cohorts were, but depending on when you were born, it's between, basically nobody will have to wait more than 6 months a year to get their pension under the plans that we had. But actually, if you go onto the SNP website, you can read the full report, and it explains clearly the different dates, that folk are in different groups. So everybody benefits from it, but the ones that are most deeply affected by the changes, they're the ones that benefit the most out of it, but it does help everybody in at least a small way.